In the beautiful island of St. Lucia, Seamoss is king. You can find it everywhere, in food and beverages, healthcare supplements, and personal care items. This yellow gold has been a staple of St. Lucian life, being farmed here for over 40 years. Seamoss is valued for its culinary versatility and its many health benefits, containing 92 of the 102 essential minerals the body needs. Seamoss is also traditionally associated with enhancing energy levels, virility, and overall well-being in various cultures. Increasing interest in Seamoss has boosted its socio-economic importance, but there are many implications for this industry as we know it. How can Seamoss farming be sustainable whilst merging tradition and innovation, and what could this mean for the management of natural resources in small island communities like St. Lucia? In the picturesque community of Savannes Bay, this is what Seamoss farming looks like.
Seamoss was introduced to me by my uncle in the 80s. Going to the 90s, we have Glacilaria, which was a very small seamoss that takes about 6 months to grow. And so during that time, you barely harvest these 3 times a year. It was a new industry at this time because we only had it was at Borai at the time and Boashado that we used to plant seamoss. Just about maybe 15 thereabout farmers in that area.
Fishermen and other persons in local communities, especially in the south, were harvesting seamoss. However, the seamoss they were harvesting was the local one, so the one that was growing wild. A lot of the wild seamoss was beginning to decline because of the heavy harvesting of that wild seamoss by fisher folk. They would go snorkeling and diving, and they would just pull up by the roots the wild seamoss. But that meant that they would sometimes leave nothing left. So what the Department of Fisheries started to do was to tell them to cut it instead. So you would end up leaving the roots and a bit of the shoot, and so the seamoss would grow back. But even that, after a while, was still not working because so many people were interested. And so then they were holding discussions with the Department of Fisheries as to could we grow, instead of just leaving it to grow back, could we just help it to grow more?
Fisheries introduced what you call Euchemia cottony, which gives a lot of more gel, and the produce is shorter, about 6 weeks to 2 months. We harvest this crop.
Since it began, Seamoss farming has evolved, attracting new participants due to its great appeal. The industry offers low operating expenses, a strong market demand, and lucrative market prices, making it a worthwhile enterprise for many.
I started Seamoss about 27 years ago, and it was introduced to me by my husband. When you get to know the benefits and all of what comes with it, it was just something that you would want to go into, to venture a bit more, to see how far and how wide you can take that product. The response to that Seamoss have been favorable, and a lot of our sales are driven by customer feedback and also tell a friend to tell a friend.
Like any other industry which depends on very specific environmental conditions to thrive, the Seamoss industry is highly vulnerable to major weather events.
The challenge for us is the hurricane season because it can go with everything in one night.
Beryl, it was a lot more intense in terms of the way it affected us. Most of the seamoss was actually washed away into the deep.
Worst of all, when our seamoss break, by the time we get into the water to try to collect some, people who are not farmers already collect boats of seamoss before us.
Not to mention, the COVID-19 pandemic catapulted the industry to new heights, but also exposed the vulnerabilities of the sector. Loss of livelihoods forced people to find alternative means of employment, and in a time where Seamoss held an extremely high market value, this meant grow, find, or steal.
The one during COVID was theft taking place. People used to come to the farm in the night to steal your Seamoss on the rope. So when you go in the morning, there's some ropes are empty and you wonder, but because of your experience planting Seamoss, you know it's not a current that goes with the Seamoss, because when the current is passing, sometimes it breaks one over here, two over there. But when you see an entire rope gone without any Seamoss, you know somebody have taken your Seamoss. So these are some of the youth challenges we were facing during COVID.
Therefore, the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund, in collaboration with the Department of Fisheries, submitted a proposal for funding to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature for the Biodiversity and Protected Areas Management Program under its Rapid Response Grants Initiative.
The objective was to see how much management or governance we could bring within the Savannes Bay area through various activities or interventions that could include demarcation and zoning of the Savannes Bay area, certification of Seamoss farmers, and ultimately try to establish a governance committee just particularly for Savannes Bay to help to address some of the issues that were as a result of the high influx of Seamoss farmers and Seamoss farms in the area. Normally when there are economic pressures, the natural environment, people tend to flock back to the natural environment, and that creates issues.
These activities involved various stakeholder agencies, including the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, St. Lucia National Trust, and the Crown Lands. Of course, these consultations engaged the Seamoss farmer and fisherfolk communities of Savannes Bay.
The outcomes were really to, again, establish some zones so that you could lessen the potential for user conflict. We also wanted to ensure that we were also addressing the matter of the impact on natural habitats such as the coral reefs and especially the seagrass meadows because of all the trampling that takes place when people wade in the water in cultivating and in establishing Seamoss farms.
Seamoss cultivating technologies have been continuously improving, and St. Lucia has been the forerunner of some of these advances. The Department of Fisheries has been at the infancy of this industry, contributing to its steady growth and witnessing its vast expansion.
Seamoss farming, of course, started in St. Lucia since the 1980s. There were persons like Janine Compton, persons like Anjuja, also known as Caban, from the south of the island. And in particular, I must mention the late Alan Smith. He was a true scientist and a true, I would say, pioneer for the introduction of Seamoss in St. Lucia, particularly in the south of the island.
So, how do we ensure that Seamoss remains viable?
Sustainable harvesting of Seamoss is very critical, not only for the conservation of the environment, but also to ensure that the livelihoods of the persons who depend on Seamoss is sustained.
Evidence-based approaches grounded in various disciplines spanning aquaculture, marine biology, and forestry science have been used to formulate best practices for local Seamoss farming.
What we have done over the years is to really demonstrate to them alternative methods of Seamoss production. So instead of using sticks or poles from mangroves, is to utilize other means of anchoring the Seamoss farms. So instead of using the sticks, they would have used concrete blocks, for example. They would have also utilized different flotation systems. So instead of using the individual or monoline system, they would have used kind of a raft system that would reduce the amount or the number of sticks required for flotation. Seamoss production would be done in seagrass areas because this is an indicator that Seamoss will do well if there is seagrass growing naturally in these areas. However, we encourage farmers to utilize the flotation system or the raft system that will reduce the amount of trampling or standing on the seagrass. So therefore they will be able to maybe set up some kind of platform, whether it be use a kayak, use the boat, or they would be able to move the rafts in areas where there is probably less seagrass, and therefore they will be able to reduce the the impact on the seagrass beds. All these measures would help, build up the consciousness amongst the Seamoss farmers and make them understand that their activity in terms of Seamoss production would have to be done in a manner that will ensure the sustainability of the environment that the Seamoss production would depend on.
It is a delicate thing managing the farming activities of this multi-million-dollar industry which unfolds within the sensitive marine space. Naturally, this is of much consequence and concern.
I think there's a lot of potential for Seamoss, but we're at a stage which is very, very pivotal. We only have a certain amount of sea space. We have a limit as to how many Seamoss producers we can actually have.
Seamoss production in St. Lucia is a traditional activity which continues to play a major role in the island's economy. This decades-old industry has grown from a small-scale artisanal activity to a highly lucrative enterprise, securing St. Lucia's place as the producer of the best Seamoss in the world.
Government and non-governmental organizations see the benefit of Seamoss to the ecosystem as well as the social and economic impact of Seamoss. And therefore, I believe that Seamoss production in Savannes Bay is on the right track.
For this reason, it is imperative that Seamoss farmers, fisherfolk, and other stakeholders work together to ensure the continued viability of local Seamoss production by fostering collaboration and adopting sustainable practices to preserve St. Lucia's critical marine resources and rich maritime heritage.